Maimer and Ve'nifa koenotam alechem ha'bikurim tnufa lifnei Hashem. Hashnei kvasim. I should probably read it to you in English.
No, I understood that bit. It's okay. This was every Shabbos afternoon. Before, when did they change over the letter of This is when they
In the morning.
In the morning?
Yeah.
All the Kohen go
for the Kiddush.
Yeah, all the Kohen got the tiny piece KG Silver for a long time.
Apparently. So we'll just read the psukim first. So these are the psukim about Sfiras HaOmer, counting the Omer. So I'll read it in English. Starting on the day after the day of rest, meaning on the 15th of Nisan, from the night
according to us.
Okay, from the night preceding the day on which you bring the Omer of barley as a wave offering. It's called a wave offering. Omer atnufa. So you wave it. Mm-hmm. You must count for yourself 7 weeks. These 7 weeks will be complete weeks. So the 7 days. There's a lot to discuss about that. You must continue to count, but not including the day after the 7th week, namely the 50th day, which will be the festival of Shavuot, and on which you must bring a grain offering of wheat to God from the new crop, as follows. You bring a bread set aside for this purpose. It must be from the land in which you dwell, not from outside the land of Israel. It must consist of 2 loaves made from 2/10 of an ephah, 1/10 of an ephah for each loaf. They must be of fine flour and must be baked and leavened. This will be the first grain offering of wheat that will be brought to God. Okay? Mm-hmm. From the new grain harvest. Only after which you may begin to bring other grain offerings from the new harvest. Along with the bread, you must bring 7 unblemished lambs in their first year, 1 young bull and 2 rams.
This was all on this first day?
This is all in Shavuos. These must be ascent offerings to God, and must be accompanied by the requisite grain offering and libations.
I didn't even know what a libation is.
Libations nesachim. It's a wine that you pour on with the... They must be offered with the intention that they be fire offerings, meaning that they're burnt, and that they be pleasing to God. Also accompanying the 2 loaves, you must offer up 1 he-goat as a sin offering and 2 lambs in their first year as a peace offering. The priest must wave some of those animals that must be brought together with the first offering bread before they are slaughtered as a live wave offering before God, specifically the 2 lambs, so that when they're still alive, usually most of the things that are waved, meaning they're bitnufa, they're done after they're slaughtered. Here it's done when it's alive. So it's hard. It's a lamb. So it's young. It's less than a year old. But it can be very small.
Did they wave the goat?
Yes, they still wave it.
Didn't they wave that?
No.
He just put his hands on it.
Okay. Inasmuch as these 2 lambs are communal peace offerings, they will be more holy to God than personal peace offerings. And then there's a lot more. You must designate this very day as a holy occasion, which you must celebrate as the festival of Shavuot. You must not perform any mundane work on it. This is an eternal rule in all your dwelling places and throughout all your generations. Okay? So that's Shavuos. Meaning the counting of the Omer leads up to Shavuos.
And to the barley offering.
What?
And to the barley offering.
No, the barley offering was on the day after Pesach. Here we didn't mention this here. What?
Chametz offering, excuse me.
Right. This is the only time that chametz is brought in the mikdash. Okay.
Except for the Soita.
So in the Hebrew, ve'nifa kohenot.
The Soita was also a chametz offering.
No.
Or was it just barley?
Everything is soha.
And the Mesorah?
In her case, it's soha. A lot of things were wheat, but they weren't leavened. When you bring a toda, then it's leavened, but you don't bring it as an offering. You just eat it. Right? There's 30 that are chametz.
The Mesorah didn't bring unleavened offering?
No. Everything is unleavened. This is the only time that you bring leavened. So in a toda, you also bring 40 lechamim, 40 loaves. 30 of which are matzah and 10 of which are leavened, or chametz. But they're not offered on the mizbeach. On the mizbeach, this is the only time that anything is offered that's chametz. V'nifa kohen otam al lechem habikurim tenufa lifnei Hashem. So these animals, we said some of them, most importantly the two lambs, are waved before they're offered. Al shnei kvasim. V'ita b'Gemara, it says in the Gemara, she'alechem milemala, she'menifa kvasim im alechem beyachad. So you have to take the lambs, and you also have to put the loaves on them when you're waving it.
That's some good balancing act.
And how do you keep the lamb from moving?
Tie its legs and feet together.
Yeah, but it still moves. It's got a head. והתחברות זו, להיות הכבשים ומלחם בתנופה, צריך להבין. Why do we connect the lamb with the two leavened loaves of Shavuos? What's the connection between the two? הנה נודע, so obviously this is going to be a very interesting exposition into something else, because he's not going to be talking about the symbolism of lambs and loaves. Okay? הנה נודע.
So why start with that?
It's a very good question. Very good question.
It gets you interested.
Yeah, I think it was the first question I asked Rav Yitzchak when I started learning Chassidus. Why even bring these psukim if you're going to be talking about something else?
What did Rabbi Yitzchak say?
I don't remember what his answer was. His answer was, I don't remember.
That's the way it is.
I don't remember. I guess the answer didn't click then. I don't know. Sometimes really you feel in the end that, yeah, he opened up a new way to see the whole thing. But the Dibur HaMaschil in Chassidus always seems to be like, not always, but many times seems to be just glued on after the fact. Like, I had a lot of things to say, and then I'm attaching, especially in talk about Ayin Beis is a lot like that.
I never learned that base. I missed that.
Ayin Beis, when it's a hemshech, it's a lot more like that, because he has a long topic, and here he had a topic they developed over a year and a half. So, in some sense, he developed it over 3 years, but the main part was over a year and a half. And so every Shabbos he talked about it. So every Shabbos he had to find a pasuk that would continue his train of thought. And that's what's so confusing. If you go by the Diburei Matchil, you'll know nothing from Ayin Beis. Don't even try. Because it's like, obviously it's connected, because everything's connected in the end. But is he taking it from there? Was he meditating on this pasuk and from there he got it? It doesn't seem that way. It seems that he had it ready and then he slaps it onto something. So it's not haphazardly. It's not like he's not thinking about it. There's no connection, but it's hard to say that it came from that. So like he was thinking about it.
Maybe
so when you have to go through what?
Maybe we should learn that.
Wouldn't spend my time on it. I mean, it's something you can read through. You just need to read through it. It's not a difficult text. There's nothing difficult about it. The difficulty is in the size and and understanding what he wants. What does he want with all of this? He wants one thing, really. He wants to explain one sentence that is found in an early Kabbalistic work. That's what he wants. Anyway. V'ita b'Gemara she'alechem milemala, we said this. Hinei noda, ki tachlit kol habriya. What is the purpose of all creation? It is liyot hayesh batel ha'ayin. To have the being, what was created, nullified to the nothingness, to what's above it, to what it can't grasp. ובכל עולם נמשך ביטול היש לפי מדרגתו. And in every reality, every world, bitul hayesh, this nullification of being, comes down according to the stature of that world, of that reality. Meaning that for one person, nullification of being is to wake up in the morning. Okay? Because for him, the thing that he wants the most in the world, the thing that he is, like you could define him as, is goofing off and sleeping in bed until whenever. And for him to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning is like Hashem, like the entire world has been dissolved into godliness.
Why do you call that bitul hayesh? Why don't you call that Kabbalah soil?
Very close. Very close. It's called bitul yesh because his being is his being separate. It's being something with a separate consciousness, separate willpower, and so on. And he's willing to nullify it. He's not willing yet to do any mission. Okay? He's not willing to get into bitul b'metziut. He's not talking about nullification of his existence, not. But of his being, as a separate being, that he's willing to give up.
You said he's willing to do it. Maybe he's prepared to do it. It's not exactly the same.
What do you mean?
Willing means, let's go. I'm only so happy I've got this opportunity to do it.
No, he doesn't want to do it. He very much
so
doesn't.
He's prepared to do it.
So what is it?
He does it, but it's grudging. He doesn't really want to do it.
Of course. But he doesn't. So that's bitul yesh. והנה עיקר הביטול להיות בטל ונכלל ממש באור אינסוף ברוך הוא, מיוחד בו בייחוד גמור ואמיתי ותכלית הייחוד. The main way, the essential aspect of nullification of bittul is to be completely immersed in the infinite light of God and to be one with it, completely one. כי התאחדות אברי הגוף בנפש החיונית השורה מתלבש בתוכם. In the same way that the body, the organs of the limbs of the body are completely nullified to the will of the soul. Whatever the psyche tells it to do, the body does. And hopefully.
Well, it should do.
Okay. שאין להם חיות אחר מוולדי חיות הנפש. They have no life force apart from what the psyche is going to bring them, what the soul is going to give them. ולכן האיברים נשמעים לרצון הנפש בביטול והתאחדות גמור. So for that reason, it's an example for what it means for something to be completely nullified to something else. And it's like being one. וכך תהיינה כוחות נפש החיונית בטלות ונכללות ממש באור אינסוף ברוך הוא השורר מקיף על נפשו. So real bittul, real nullification, means that my psyche, my life force itself, is completely nullified and immersed and included within the light of the infinite that surrounds me. So that's a very nice ideal. Okay, what's the problem? The problem is, אך הנה בטבע האדם ותולדתו אין כמו ביטול זה. ודוגמתו אינו נמצא בגשמיות כלל.
אפילו צדיק?
In Teva, there's nothing like this. I can't give you an example. He says, there's no such thing in the innate nature of anything in the world. There's no such thing. You just told me that the body nullifies itself to the life force, to the psyche. Ken. But that's not what we mean by bittul. By bittul we mean nullification to the infinite. And that I can't give you an example of. He says, there's no place I can show you this. ודוגמתו לבטל רצונו מבני רצון אחרים בבחינת ביטול זה, כאילו אין לו רצון אחר כלל. So for a human being, again, not in nature, I didn't mean in nature out there, because in a moment he's going to give us an example from nature. And in the nature of human beings, there's no such thing. People are not built that way.
Only robots.
Robots or animals. Animals have this.
Animals have bittul?
Yeah, complete bittul of their will. So when you're riding a horse and you control the horse has no will of its own anymore.
He wants to get rid of you, wants to throw you off. He doesn't like you.
No, it's not true.
He wants to eat hay.
When he's completely being ridden by a human being, you can ride him till you kill him. You can ride him into the ground, literally. You do the same thing with an ox. You can do the same thing with the sheep. If you could find something, do something with them. I don't know if you could find something. But that's why we call them sheep to the slaughter. Because they have no separate will, really, if you take over their will. So it's not like a human being, even when he has Kabbalah soul, so he still has his will. He just put it aside. He gets over it. But it's still there. It's not going anywhere. And by an animal, this is going to be his example, by an animal, you can really ride it into the ground. You can mamish kill it. You're completely overtaking its will. That's why the people that are most sadistic, what they wanted to see was if they could do this to a human being. That's what they want to see. They want to take away the will. That's why they want to break it. They want to break the will. אבל בטבע האדם, לוותר רצונו מפני רצון אחרים בבחינת ביטול זה כאילו אין לו רצון אחר כלל, that doesn't exist. As if he has no other will. Of course he has another will. He does what you tell him to do, but he's not willing ever to give up his own will. It's always there. Even somebody who was born into slavery, he still has a will of his own. And any moment that he will get, and any opportunity that he will get, if he can get over his fears, he'll exercise that will. But an animal is not like that.
So you want to say to me, this person's decided to do something, and he knows it's wrong, and you know it's wrong, and you talk to him, and you convince him that this is wrong, and he should do something else. He'll never really believe you, or never really listen on any opportunity.
Until it becomes his will. Yeah. If it becomes his will, it's a simple. הטבע זו היא בבהמה, שהן בטלות ברצון המנהיגם, ולכל אשר יחפוץ יטה אותם, ואינם משנות את תפקידם. So that's the great thing about animals. Animals, at least domesticated animals, they have this nature that they can completely nullify their will, absolutely, fully, completely, to the one who's leading them, to the one who's controlling them. And they can give it over.
Is that a will? Do they really have a will? Do they really understand what they're doing?
No, of course they don't. But when they give over, when they've been
Submission.
when they've been domesticated, or whatever you want to call it, when they've been turned into a work animal, then their will is exactly the will of the owner. They have no separate will. You won't find them like suddenly. I mean, you mentioned food. So if there's food there and you leave it, so they'll go eat, but they'll never fight you for it. If you take them away, you take them away. That's it. Now we're doing something else. We're not eating now. To the point, again, that you could kill them. You could drive them into the ground. It's a very interesting thing about animals. How is this possible? Because their root, their source of their psyche, of their consciousness, whatever it is in a very high holy place.
You're in the chariot, no?
Okay. In a very high place, in the light of the infinite. And there they are in complete nullification to the infinite light.
But the same chariot is also a human being, so why is the
Okay, but it's more, here he's saying that it's higher than the chariot. He's saying that their psyche comes from an even higher place. Meaning in the chariot, what you're seeing is already a descent into the world of emanation. But in the source, the real source is much, much higher.
So the animals are higher than human beings?
Their root is much higher. The root of the animal's will is higher than the root of the human being's will, in a certain sense. Again, in terms of reaching this complete nullification. But they descended lower into animals. This type of will descended lower, and there it can become subservient to man. And that's why Hashem made them this way, so they could serve man. And that's the purpose of a sacrifice. שהיו מקריבין הבהמה על גבי המזבח, ועולה חיותה במקורה ושורשה, שבחינת ביטול ממש, ואור אין סוף ברוך הוא. So you take the animal, and you place it on the altar, and its life force goes up to its source, it returns to its source, which is complete bittul to the infinite light.
Well, that's only for those animals which are void to go on the mizbeach.
Yeah.
What about all the things that can never be tamed, like the snakes?
We're talking about domesticated animals. They don't. Obviously, they're not the same. They can't be tamed. You can't tame a snake. If it's nice to begin with a garter snake, so you can tame it. Because the worst it's going to do is slide off and go somewhere else. Okay? But you can't tame a cobra, you can't tame a black mamba, you can't tame these things because they have a will of their own. They're not interested in being domesticated. Okay, so that's an example of like, in that sense, they're from a different place. And the sacrifices were taken from livestock and from sheep and goats. They were taken from animals. 9:30. Wow.
I just could work out why it's 8:30.
Yeah, no. I have somebody coming in 5 minutes.
Okay, so we'll finish the base.
We'll see where we go. And they're not from animals. Why not from animals? Why only from livestock and from these? Because they have more bittul. Their bittul, their nullification comes from a higher place than animals. And usually you would take sheep and sacrifice it. Because they have even more than the rest of the livestock. The sheep are completely sheep. That's why we say sheep to the slaughter. We don't say cows to the slaughter. Because the root, for instance, the ox, the cow, comes from the left side, because that's where the ox in the chariot was. Mm-hmm. So, and that's gvura, that's might. So they have some might in them, especially an ox, right? So it's very hard to domesticate an ox. I don't know if you can. Maybe you can.
Yeah, they usually
can, but I don't know if it's never at the same level as a sheep. That's for sure. And they have some gvura. They have some.
You know that from the Gemara.
Okay.
The Gemara talks about what if an ox does this and what if an ox does that.
Mm-hmm.
And the damages. It doesn't talk about a sheep.
No, sheep could also do damage.
It doesn't talk about them. I'm saying
the example is. But the sheep, they come from the middle axis of the sfirot, and so they designate mercy, compassion. We see what was
I thought the sheep had the midah of Rachel.
Even more so. It's the other side of Zah. It's the lower side of Zah. It's even more Rachamim. It's all along the middle axis. Right? You're right. That Rachel is a name for a female sheep. Even the is a sound that is full of that awakens compassion.
Bleating.
The bleating is a sound that awakens compassion. Because their root is from a higher place, which is the source of all compassion. That's why they have this sound that they make. And they're also weak in their nature. They're not obstinate. They're nothing. And so you feel how much nullification they have. He adds another thing. The fact that they have wool, which comes from very high places. It says in the Zohar, it's interesting, they write here, Zohar Gadol. What in the world does it mean? Zohar Gadol is the Cremona printing of the Zohar. Okay. Cremona was in 1 volume. Mantua was in 3 volumes.
Where's Cremona?
Italy, but both places are in Italy, and they were in competition who would finish the Zohar first. So they ended up printing 2 different versions of the Zohar. They're not that, it's not like everything's different. Some of the order is different. We go by the Mantua edition, because it's in 3 volumes. That's the one that we have. But the Cremona edition, it calls it the Big Zohar, was because it was in 1 volume. It was much bigger. I only know one person in the world who's learned the Zohar from beginning to end in both editions. They're very hard to get. They cost a lot. It's just to get a Cremona is probably $50,000 today, I think.
So?
To get the 3 volumes. Cremona is the Mantua, sorry. The Cremona is even harder to get, I think. I don't know if it's 50,000, but for 1 volume it's like 20,000. So I only know one person who's learned the Zohar from beginning, who owns both and has learned it from beginning to end.
Not you. You?
No, I don't have it. Anyway, there's slight differences between them. So he says here in the Zohar Gadol, and he gives the location. I don't know why he brought it in the Mantua, because that's the usual way we designate the pages of the Zohar. And Abel also brought from the first of his livestock, of his sheep. And it says there, "Machshavtei have ba'u atar de'itmar be'vati kamin yati b'sar reshei ka'amar nekei." So he says he brought wool. So he says, so Zohar says his thinking was, his intent was in the place of clean, of what we call the side locks of Atik. It's a part of of the Keter where it's white wool. It looks like white wool. The side locks look like white wool. And Hashem accepted this, and that was his sacrifice, what Abel brought. So we see that the wool itself comes from a very high place, and we don't have that in sheep. On the contrary, the sheep is like a beard. Sorry, we don't have it in goats. The goats is like, it's like harder stuff. It's much harder. It's like hair. It's hairy.
Like you used it in the Michigan.
Okay, but it's much harder hair, and it's straight, and it's not soft. The main thing is that it's not soft. So even the softness is like the side locks. They're very soft and white. So they go up to the middle axis, all the way up to the crown, into the second highest part of the crown.
So why did Dafka use goat's hair in the Mishkan as opposed to?
As a covering is something that divides, they're better. Because if you would make it out of wool, it would be pervious. I mean, if it ever rained in the Mishkan, I don't know if it did, but it would go in. And apparently the goat's hair is much better for making something separate in that sense. Something to separate. So we have a nice introduction to this whole topic. So we'll continue tomorrow, B'ezrat Hashem.
At?
I don't know, you tell me.
Monday?
You're looking at me like I should know something and I don't know.
8:45.
8:45. Okay.